I would say that Mamdani, he represents almost in a pure form the class struggle. You know, the famous line by Karl Marx in the beginning of the Communist Manifesto. The first line is, the history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggles.
Mm.
The history of all hitherto existing societies is the history of class struggles. And we're seeing in the Mamdani campaign, it's clearing the air. If you remember when the Bernie Sanders challenge to the existing system emerged, it got the powers that be tried to confuse the stakes. So all of these woke people, they started to criticize Bernie for being weak on the black question, weak on racism, weak on reparations, weak on the women question. They said Bernie bros.
Hmm.
That was how they called it. That was all men, all white men. Of course, Bernie's campaign was all about the class struggle. Every night when he came out, it was attacking the billionaire class. It was attacking Goldman Sachs. It was attacking big pharma. But both the Republican and the Democratic Party both tried to obscure what was going on by turning it into an identity politics struggle. So the Republicans represented the oppressed white working class
Hmm.
who are being oppressed by identity politics, you know, and affirmative action and diversity, equity, inclusion. And the Democratic Party tried to turn it into also an identity politics campaign. We represent Black people, Mexican, Hispanic people, sexual minorities. So each of them pretended they wanted to obscure the real issue. The real issue was a class struggle.
Mm.
And Bernie was very emphatic about that. Now with Mandani, that sort of identity politics is not going to stick with him. You can't say a fellow named Mamdani is weak on um, race questions,
Hmm.
ethnic questions, religious questions. It's not going to work. So it's a straight out class struggle. His campaign was just like Bernie's. Uh, Bernie's was about affordability, and that's Zohran Mamdani's about affordability. But in this case, you can't use any of the woke weapons against him because his name is Zohran Mamdani. He's clearly not a old white male, you know. So it's a clear cut class struggle. They're very scared of it because the remember the other side has the money, they have the power, they have the organization, but one thing they don't have the numbers. And in a democracy, a formal democracy, one person, one vote, that's a problem. They don't have the numbers. The numbers aren't even close. And now the primary, they brought to bear their money. Bloomberg, just Bloomberg, Michael Bloomberg, a former mayor of New
Hmm.
York, a Jewish supremacist billionaire, he gave Cuomo $8.3 million. And as I said, your mailboxes were stuffed with, we have to stop Mamdani. We have to stop Mamdani. Anti Semitism. They were I mean, literally, jam-packed the mailboxes. Didn't work. The numbers are coming back to haunt them. It's not what the Occupy movement said. It's not 99%. Remember the slogan of the Occupy movement, we are the 99%. It's closer to 80%. 80% is a lot. 80% are the losers in this system. 80% are the folks who have gig jobs, what are called, gigs. Three people they have 3 gigs, no vacation, no health care, no pension, no future, no nothing. That's about 80% of our city. Um, so they're worried, and it's very predictable. I predicted the first day. I knew exactly. I sent people the email. The first thing they're going to do is they're going to buy out all of the opposition candidates, the three main opposition candidates. Not any of your viewers should know or would know, would be Curtis Sliwa, who is the Republican nominee, Eric Adams, the current mayor of New York, and possibly Andrew Cuomo. It's still unclear.
Mm.
So they were going to buy out all except one. And they're all crooks, Eric Adams, Andrew Cuomo, they're crooks from the day go. So it's easy to buy them off, a bribe here, a bribe there. So they'll narrow it down to one versus one. Exactly what Obama and the Democratic Party leadership did after South Carolina. You remember Obama picked up the phone, get Buttigieg out, told him, you don't drop out, no future in the party.
Mm.
Called up Amy Klobuchar, don't drop out, no future in the party. And then it came down to Biden versus Bernie. And that's when it was over. Because up until that point, the mainstream Democrats were divided. It was Elizabeth, even at the end, it was Elizabeth Warren, Biden, Buttigieg, and Amy Klobuchar. So step number one, get rid of the other candidates. And now step number two, it's perfectly obvious what's going to happen. It's what they did with Jeremy Corbyn. With Jeremy Corbyn, it began in the UK with the Labour Party. It began with the Jewish Board of Deputies attacking him on anti-Semitism. And the issue was for them, I mean, the Jewish Board of Deputies are basically a fifth column. They are foreign agents of the state of Israel. They should register as foreign agents, but of course, they're not going to be asked to because then it's a trope. Jewish, you're claiming that Jews have dual loyalty, a trope, they call it. I hate that word. It's just a stupid word. Uh, so they're foreign agents, they're agents of the Israeli government. In any event, so they started with the anti-Semitism, and then what happened? The whole British ruling elite, they latched onto it. From BBC to Sky News, from the Guardian newspaper to the tabloids in the UK, they all latched on to the anti-Semitism. Not that they cared about anti-Semitism. The
Mm.
Board of Deputies cared. True, not anti-Semitism. The Board of Deputies cared that Corbyn was not aligned with Israel. So they wanted to stop Corbyn for only one reason, Israel, the Jewish Board of Deputies, because they're Israeli agents. But then the whole ruling class, because they didn't want Corbyn, he represented the real insurgency. He was another a class struggle, was the class struggle. So they all exploited the anti-Semitism to stop Corbyn. And it did play a role. It wasn't the critical role. The critical role, judging by all the information we have, the critical role was Brexit, that Corbyn was not firm on the Brexit issue, Britain leaving the European Union. But the anti-Semitism played a role. The assault attack played a role. And so now in New York, they'll find one candidate and they're going to go after Mamdani on the anti-Semitism issue.
Do you think it'll be as effective?
And it all depends on him. My counsel, which hasn't been solicited, but I'll just tell you, don't appease because he'll never win. If you remember the Corbyn campaign, he made one concession after another concession after another concession. The party adopted the IHRA definition of anti Semitism, which is basically any criticism of Israel as anti Semitic. They gave in on that. Did it help them? Did the juggernaut suddenly stop? You can't appease them because the issue is not anti Semitism. The issue is Israel and the class war. They are not going to let Zohran Mamdani, even if he gets circumcised, gets a bar mitzvah,
I mean, he's Muslim,
and
so
does
I
the
assume that he is circumcised.
yeah, yeah, right. I recognize that, but you get the point.
Yeah.
Um, so they will never he will never placate them. He should, in my opinion, he should stand firm in his convictions. He should surround himself with an iron wall of Jews who support him and let them do the hard work of fighting off these Jewish supremacist billionaires. And there are a sufficient number of young Jews who support Zohrani, and
Many
he
that have been
should make,
canvassing for him quite actively as well.
excuse me?
And many of them have been canvassing quite actively for him.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And he should make the point over and over and over again. I am not the extremist. I am in the mainstream. I go with what Amnesty International has to say. I go with what Human Rights Watch has to say. I go with what the International Court of Justice has to say. I go with what international law has to say. I go with what a large number of Holocaust scholars or genocide scholars, including Israeli genocide scholars. I go with what they have to say. You are the extremists. You are the fringe. I am not the fringe. You are the fringe. Israel is the fringe. Israel's defenders are the fringe. I am not. That should be his strategy. No appeasement, no attempt to placate. Surround yourself with an iron wall of Jews who support you and let them make the case and make the point over and over again. I am not the extremist. You are. You're the ones defending what the International Court of Justice decided was a plausible genocide. I'm opposing that plausible genocide. You are the extremists, not me. That strategy it's not going to win Jews. Or I should say, it won't win the older generation of Jews. It'll probably win about 30% of the younger generation. I would estimate it about 30% of the younger generation. So that's what I would recommend to him. If he starts appeasing them, number one, it'll never work. And you know what's going to happen? Number two, it'll disillusion his base. They'll say he's already betraying his convictions and he hasn't yet even been elected. And it'll dissipate the enthusiasm. So it'll be a disaster we already know it. We know it from the Corbyn campaign. It'll be a disaster if he goes down that path. I don't know what he'll do. I'm sure, right now, the Jewish mafia, like Gerald Nadler in New York, he's saying he's supporting Mamdani. No. Gerald Nadler has a very long history of being a grotesque apologist for Israel. Um, but his aim is to try to persuade from within. And there'll be a lot of sweet talking, a lot of talk about being reasonable, about Jewish fears, and, using all of that language. And I don't know how he'll stand up. It's it's too soon to tell. So far, he's done well, I would say. Um, the two comparisons that are being made with him are with Barack Obama and with AOC, but Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. But the comparisons are completely wrong. First of all, Obama had no program at all. He said it himself. If you read his autobiography, he said, he quoted a neat trick. I stood for nothing. He said that.
Hmm.
I stood for nothing. It was a neat trick, he said. And secondly, Obama ran with the money. The billionaire class supported Obama. They gave him huge amounts of money from beginning in Chicago. The Pritzker family, which is one of the richest families in Chicago, they backed Obama. Zohran Mamdani, he had a very concrete program. People called it crazy. Free buses, free childcare. But there was a very concrete program there. It's not Obama, a neat trick. And secondly, Mamdani ran against the money. He was outspent 30-1 by the billionaire class. So that's not Obama. And it's not AOC, because AOC got elected before anyone knew what her politics were. It was a kind of fluke. It was all done at a very local level. Mamdani had to face the tough questions before he won the primary. They were hammering him already about the anti-Semitism. They were hammering him about his tax the rich, and how can you do that because the laws don't allow you to. He was already AOC faced no opposition. There was a very old guy who was in her district. He didn't even know what was going on. He was completely detached. But with Cuomo versus Mamdani, they knew what was going on. Everybody understood what was going on. This is a class war. And that's why we're giving him $25 to $30 million. This is serious business. Because as Mr. Reckler said, this is the capital of capitalism. You don't run a socialist candidate here. So he faced the opposition already, which AOC was basically below the radar when she got elected. So it's not AOC, and it's not Obama. It's a very different. The closest thing is obviously Bernie, with the obvious difference. Well, it's not yet obvious difference because we don't know who will win in November. I think it'll be a tough battle, but it's a battle which, frankly, I relish because the identity politics is dead now. You can't use that. All the woke people like Angela Davis and Ta-Nehisi Coates and Gloria Steinem, all the woke people who attacked Bernie, that's over. You can't do that with Mamdani. It's not going to work. So it's going to be a clear class struggle. But of course, the other side is going to try to misrepresent it as it's an issue of anti-Semitism.
Mm.
That's what they'll try to do. But everybody understands what's going on. I mean, they're just very, the ruling class, they're very straightforward. They say we've got to stop this guy. You read the front page of the Times. They says all these business leaders got together with Eric Adams. We got to stop this guy. They're not so much afraid of him. No, they're afraid of the movement. The the electorate is supposed to be passive, and they should choose among the candidates that we decided. You remember what the New York Times wrote in the editorial? They said Mamdani should not even have a line on the ballot. Can you hear that? On the primary ballot. There were a large number of people running in the primary. They said he shouldn't even have a line on the primary ballot. They couldn't have felt very well when they discovered their influence now is down to about zero. Nobody gave a damn what the New York, my day, a New York Times endorsement, at least in New York City politics, decided the election. It was a very fraught moment. The New York Times editorial, who it endorsed. Yes, it was a very big moment. Even when you knew who they were going to endorse, it was still a solemn occasion, that New York Times editorial, who it's endorsing. Now nobody gives a shit. Or darn, they've lost all credibility.